This tutorial will walk through how you can actually send an email to your coworkers that do not have a Salesforce login and include files that you would have uploaded to an opportunity or other Salesforce object that you want to send emails from. So our business case was that we were using opportunities to track orders, and ultimately we needed to pass the documentation, the signed contracts, along to our accounting team for their records and for verification. There's no quick and easy way to do that directly from Salesforce, since these are private files. So what we opted to do is to actually take any files that were attached to the opportunity and produce basically a public link list, which is stored in this accounting contract URL field. And this is just a custom field that we added, which will store one-to-many contract names as well as the public link to those. These are just filler values just for the demonstration purposes. So what happens is when you check this box, it'll kick off a process which then calls a workflow, and the workflow will run through all of these files here and produce this output. This is all done actually before we mark the opportunities, close one, and then that triggers an email to the accounting department. So let's jump right in and see how this all goes together, because this did have me stumped for a while and I imagine others could benefit from it. So the first thing that happens is when we check that toggle switch I showed you on our opportunity, we start to call this workflow, which is start URL update. And the main thing that happens here is that we're creating a variable called opportunity var, and this is just the ID of the opportunity that we were just looking at. So this is key because when I first started out, I thought I could just use workflows and have it monitor the opportunity. That never worked because I could never get a variable in to the workflow, which then ran everything. So this was key. Stumped me for a while, so hopefully it helps others to know that from the process you take you create a variable which is then passed to the workflow. So now that we have our opportunity, we know which value we're going to go work against. Let's take a look at the workflow and see how that goes. The first step, and this is taking information from that process we just left, is to actually look up all the files that are associated with that opportunity. So if I scroll up here, we're actually looking up content document link, and it's got to be equal to that opportunity variable that we just made. So all of the results that we find, we're actually storing in something that I've called a file collection. This is a Salesforce object collection variable. Think of it as an array that you can store a number of things in. And what we're storing in there are the content document ID as well as the ID of that document. So we look up all of those at one shot, and then we step into this loop object. And the loop object simply just says that for everything in our file collection that we just made, and this really doesn't matter for our case because we're not going to do any logic afterwards, so ascending or descending didn't matter. But for everything that we find in our file collection, create something called a file variable, and the file variable is what we are going to process within the loop steps next. So the first file variable that we create, we're actually going to find the latest version of that document, and so we're looking up the content version, and so you can see our file variable here, and then this is a parameter of that variable. I don't know if there's an easy way to see this. I don't think so. Yeah, it's content document ID. And then we just pass in that we want the latest document using this global constant and setting isLatest equal to true. What comes out is ID and title, and those are the things that are related to the content version. We assign them to these two variables here. Once we have that, we can actually create the content distribution step. So this is effectively saying we want to produce the link for this document. So we're actually creating a content distribution step, and then we're passing in these variables here and constants. So most of these are just constants allowing us to produce the downloadable links and all the details that we want to get in the next step. So all of this basically gets returned to a content distribution variable, which we're going to use here to look up just the public link as well as the name. So we're looking for the ID which matches that content distribution variable, and then we're basically establishing two new variables, the distribution public URL as well as the name. and those are just associated to those fields. Once we have that, we actually need to build the output that we want to display on that opportunity record. So this is a little tricky, and this took me a while to get right, and looking at several other examples, I was able to put it together. But really what you have is a single variable which has a number of different values appended to it. The formatting wasn't as easy as I'd hoped it to be, but at least it's doable. So you have this linked list display variable, which first has the document name added to it, and then we add something called a single new line, and then the distribution URL, and then a double new line. And these double new lines are actually the text templates I'm about to show you, but the text templates need formulas in order to make them effective. So let's look at these next. The single new line and the double new line are very similar. They consist of a hyphen and then a hard return and then another hyphen. And the double new line is basically the same thing, just one extra hard return. The reason to do this is because you cannot just save a hard return in this text template. It does not work. I tried, and a number of other people have tried to, and unfortunately somebody found a way to make it happen. So with these templates, the next thing we actually have to do is use some formulas to strip out the hyphens and only leave the hard returns. So you'll notice under this single new line template, I actually am doing a substitution for all of the hyphens and passing in empty string. The beautiful thing is this does leave behind the hard returns, which gives us the formatting that we're looking for, where you have the the name as well as the link, and then 2 spaces, and then the next name, and then the link. So this is how you do it. Just 2 different formulas. The only difference is they reference different variables. So we have that one, and then we have this one. And again, it's just a variable reference. So those help us clean up the common variable that is being assigned all 4 of these values. So linked list display, document name, then the line break, then the link, and then a double line break. That gives us that nice formatting. And so this just runs in this loop as many times as it needs to, and at the very end, the last step that we do is actually to update the opportunity object with this linked list display that we're building, and it's going to that accounting contract URL field. So again, we're just stepping back to the same opportunity that we started with. This is our opportunity variable, and this helps us to update that field that I showed you before. So a lot of the hard work happens in this workflow. Once that's set and we have our links, the very last step that we do is just to send out a very basic email notification. This isn't really related to the producing of the document links, but just the last step for us. So when an opportunity is marked close won, we trigger an email notification to our accounting department, and that has all the details in it that we want to send across. So the contract amount, who's responsible, all of the the account details that we need to process it. So I hope that helps some folks, because it was a little bit of a struggle for me, and I couldn't find a comprehensive example or video that walks through from very beginning to end how you could do something like this. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments below, and I hope that helps.